So this is not the best way to have a church meeting, but I really do appreciate you coming on a nice evening like this to participate in this manner. And there's a lot to get you informed about, because Blooming Glen Mennonite Church has been alive even during a quarantine period. And there's been a lot going on with the different leadership groups of the church. Now, with this type of format, it's nearly impossible for us to do any kind of meaningful dialogue on issues, and that's not the purpose of tonight. Rather, what we want to do is just give you information of some of the things that the leadership groups have been working through, and also just to inform. I'll leave some time at the end for some discussion, although I'm not sure that can effectively happen too easily. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. And then we'll close with Mike Ford leading us in prayer to surround the issues we're discussing and our church with prayer. But what I'd like to do now is open, is Mike Bishop on board here with us today? I hope he is, because Michael was going to lead us with a reflection or some other type of way to focus us. Michael, are you with us? Okay, well, sometimes plans just don't work out. But in any case, let's dive into the meeting. And there was an agenda for it that was put into the church Glen News that outlines the presentations you're going to hear tonight. And I'm going to ask each person to put themselves into an unmute position as they present. And then I will bridge in between each presentation as we go forward. So this is really not a good opportunity to ask questions to people, but certainly leadership board or the different groups you'll hear from would invite your continued dialogue to them by telephone to the leaders or by email. As you hear issues presented, feel free to weigh into them more directly. So I'm going to turn this over to Bob Bishop, who's going to speak on behalf of the trustees, and Bob happens to be right aside of me. So,
thank you, Jeff. On behalf of the trustees, there's a few things I'd like to share. Jeff asked me to say what didn't happen with Workday being canceled. What didn't happen, unfortunately, was the loss of the fellowship and camaraderie that takes place during that time. It's so important. I say it's so fundamental to getting people together, having a good time. One thing that did happen is that when church was canceled and we couldn't come, Bill Sigmans, our facilities manager, asked if he had the mulch, he would be very happy to spread it. One load was donated and delivered and dumped. He spread that, and two more loads followed. And we thank him so much for that. Brian Gorley was going to lead that responsibility of mulching, planting, weeding, and so forth. Brian's other major task was going to be addressing the shrubbery around the house where the Reardons live. It's gotten out of hand, and that too will wait. In the cemetery, you may have been aware that last fall, Adolph coordinated on Workday the hardscaping around one of the columbarium walls, under drainage and hardscaping, so that you no longer have to have wet feet no matter what the weather, and it works so well. The other wall is waiting to be done. The materials are there, and that will happen this fall. There were other things, painting indoor and outdoor. I can tell you that in the Welcome Center, thanks to Adolph, Peter, and Berge Electric, the coffee maker is installed, connected, and ready to go, as is the dishwasher. Additionally, in the Welcome Center, Phil and Adolph have been in discussion with others to have the fire extinguishers put back in place at the appropriate places. And to that end, they had a representative from the company who services those for us come and suggest where they need to be, the size, the location, and the different enclosures that would be appropriate for those settings. There's one thing that I'm really tickled to tell you about. It may not seem exciting to you, but it was to me. Years ago, the trustees had the foresight to remove an underground storage tank and put a new one in, a secondary containment vault. It's huge. 8,000-gallon tank sits inside of a concrete vault. It's pretty expensive to fill that. And back in January, we were down to about 1,000 gallons. And Andy Rosenberger, a trustee who follows the prices of oil, said, look, let's just put enough in to get us through some bad weather. 2,000 gallons were ordered at $2.36 a gallon. And he said, we're going to wait. We're going to wait. I think the prices are coming down. We'll wait and wait. And I'm happy to tell you that on May 29th, 6,800 gallons were put in at $1.19. That is just half the price. It's $8,000, a little more, $8,100, but it's half of what it would have been if we would have filled it. Andy, I applaud you for your counsel in that matter. And if anybody is listening that would be so inclined, on Friday evening at 7 o'clock, I would like to have a couple people show up to help set the picnic tables back in the rows where they need to be. Right now, they're at one end, they're covered with pollen. That'll all be washed off tomorrow or Friday morning, and they will be put in place because things are starting to relax and unfold a bit. Jeff, that's concludes my announcement.
Good. Bob and I happen to be in the same room here to facilitate dialogue a little bit more, so that's why I can just turn the computer. I do understand that Michael was found. Oh, he has a bad connection, so I just learned again. He is not available. So that's what you get when we do.
No, I'm here, Jeff.
Oh,
I
he's
was
back.
lost, but now I'm found.
Michael, I'm going to give you the opportunity to lead us in a reflection of some sort because
Sure.
your brother just reported so ably for the trustees.
Good.
So you're just
I'm always better to follow him anyhow.
All right, you're just one notch off the agenda, so I'll
That's
turn
okay.
it over to you for a few minutes.
I'm
of
usually one
reflection.
brig short anyhow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm late, folks. I could find every Zoom but this one. Welcome and come, good people. Come out of moments of despair, out of moments of joy, out of your everyday, out of heights and depths. May we come as we are to meeting and to fellowship, to the one who makes us one, to the one who loves us. May the words, thoughts, discernments, concerns and questions, responses and choices that we make this evening and in life be pleasing and purposeful unto God's delight. And all God's people said in their own secluded place, Amen. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. Appreciate you getting in to join us there. Looks like you're enjoying the outdoors, and that's awesome. I should say that for those of you more familiar with the Zoom technology, you are welcome to type a chat to me. I'll watch for them. If you have any specific question or comment that you'd like me to talk about during the time that we've set aside for discussion. At this time, I want to move on to Bruce Thomas, who speaks on behalf of the Stewardship Committee. So Bruce, are you available to talk to us?
I will try. So, all right. I just want to give everyone a quick update as to where we are. As you probably saw in the Glen News this past week, 5 months activity was put in there, and I tried to show comparative to 2019 and 2018 because sometimes it's just good just to see a couple years trends. Although with what's happened in the last 3 months, trends kind of go out the window, so to speak, but that's the way it is. So for the 5 months, our income is actually 8,000 higher than what it was for the same time period last year, which I am so grateful for because going into this, there was a lot of apprehensive on my part as to how will that affect giving, and must say I continue to have that going forward, but I celebrate for the 5 months that we have. As far as the giving, As you can see, spending is down about 66,000. So some of that was planned in the spending plan. As you know, our spending plan for 2020 was less than what it was for 2019. Also, some of that obviously is because we haven't been meeting and using our building as much. Some of our costs, whether it's maintenance, office supplies, some of that has decreased also. So our deficit for the 5 months is a little less than 136,000 compared to 210,000 a year ago. So so thankful for that, and I know stewardship as a group is very thankful for that. A couple other things I just wanted to mention is we did sign up for the Paycheck Protection Program, as some of you might have heard in the news about that. We got 71,000 on that, so we're monitoring it. I anticipate that we will utilize everything as the requirements are for. If perchance there's anything that we don't use, we will pay that back. So we did do that. Otherwise, I've been in many discussions, especially with trustees, as to different projects that they're working with, and funding and other things like that too. So I do want to give thanks for everyone for your faithful giving, especially with us meeting on Sundays, to be sending those checks in, to use the electronic giving. It makes our job, especially Robin, who has to write the checks out from a cash flow perspective, it makes it easier when the money is flown in. So continue to be faithful and pray prayer on that for the rest of the year, so that we don't have to get to November and December and need as big of a amount as we traditionally have. It would be nice if we don't need to start begging for that. Otherwise, just lost my train of thought. Otherwise, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out to me or anyone on stewardship. I mean, we are meeting monthly, and as things come up, we talk about, or we do it via email. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Bruce, thank you very much. And on behalf of the leadership board, I also echo the thanks to the congregation for its faithful giving. It's just a wonderful thing to see how that stayed consistent, even during this time where we're not in fellowship directly together. And want to thank the stewardship group for their good work, as well as the trustees, as Bob reported, for the things they're doing. It's awesome that we have these groups working on behalf of the church. There's another team that I've asked to report, and that was to be the elders. And Rick Kratz, I believe, as elders chair, is here to speak for the elders. Rick.
Hello, everyone. It's always nice to see all these familiar faces. Just a few updates from the elders, and then also a few thoughts or reflections. We met in May, second week of May, discussed preaching topics and the pastors for May and June, knowing that we most likely weren't going to be together in May and June. Also, we had some guest pastors that were scheduled that were rescheduled for later on. Hopefully we can come together, discuss plans for worship service, like I said. As far as mutual aid, I did want to say I've been so impressed with how Sunday school classes have reached out and embraced each other and supported each other. Every time I would talk to Michael, I'd say, are there any mutual aid needs? And he said, really, everyone's taking care of themselves and taking care of each other. So really, it's a strength of Blooming Glen, and I've been just so impressed and pleased with how people have been reaching out to each other within their Sunday school classes to meet needs. And then there's been a variety of topics that come up or issues that come up that we would correspond with the pastors about as they would come up with Zoom meetings or with emails. And I guess I just wanted to touch a little bit on what's been going on recently. I feel like the elders, we haven't really discussed it yet as elders, but feel like we should, help lead the church or give some guidance to the church as far as how we're going to learn with the racism issues that have been going on. And I really wanted to say I feel like I've heard from different times that we really should be educating ourselves. We can't expect someone to educate us. So I've ordered a few books for myself, but I've seen on Facebook different people watching certain movies or websites and different resources. So I would anticipate in the next week or two putting some resources out either on our website or through the Glen News for people that are interested. And also I know Steve Chris has a lot of wisdom and experience. I would anticipate him helping us as well. I did participate in the Southern March on Thursday and the Percy March on Sunday. I think it's just something that's important for us to continue to work at and discuss. And I was listening to Dave Ramsey last night, and he had two things I just wanted to share real quick. One is Romans 12:15-18. It says, "Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. Never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone." And then he just shared a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. And it's just, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Thank you.
Rick, thank you for speaking to us on behalf of the elders. It's a group that we really do appreciate all of your behind the scenes and also direct work to minister to our church body. So thank you for the work your group is doing. I want to give time, 5 minutes each, more or less, to both Michael and Mike, that they can maybe just share how they're doing during this unusual time of ministry. Unprecedented is the word we hear so often, and it does really ring true for those of our pastoral crew. And I don't know, guys, did you flip a coin as to who's going to speak first? All right. How about?
I'll go.
There you
I'm
go.
here.
Got it.
Nothing major here. In this time, I have found in both pastoral care and in worship, there's always enough new stuff all the time, even in normal times, that this is complicated a bit more, but every day has its own unique challenges and joys. And about the time I get cranky, God shows up with a pick-me-up bouquet, just what's needed. Pastoral care has not stopped. It has only increased in different forms and functions. Overall, I would say that it has not been overwhelming, which I think was a bit of a surprise. I thought it would be otherwise. I think the team is stepping up and people are taking advantages of their village people that are part of our church and beyond, neighbors, relatives, family. And I think they have a bit more time too. They're not maybe balancing going to work and everything. And so people have found the downtime to provide a new opportunity. The care team is amazingly dedicated, creative, and ever responsive. It was not complicated until recent deaths of Linda Rittenhouse and Harley Smith and Jenny Fujita's mother. When they come all on one day, it raises the bar of anxiety pretty quickly. But like everything else, one thing at a time, we get through it. I'd like to believe that we have responded to these families as well as we could, each one fund their own needs and also taking advantage of the locations, pavilion and graveside, and then also employing technology to share their service with family who could not attend, each one choosing their own technique and method of doing that. One more service this Saturday. Worship, I'd like to believe again that it continues with the same intentions as always, simple yet creative within the challenges and the limits of our technology and our skill set. We are still learning. We ask for your patience. We can't always manage the schedules that we try to keep. Things don't always cook on the stove like we think they're going to come out. I'd like to believe that our services are continue to be relevant, responsive, and resilient. That's about all I can say. And they're not perfect. Life is not perfect, but we're trying to stay in there with good spirits, good intentions, humility, waiting upon the Lord, but waiting with intentionality. That's all I have to say about that.
Michael, thank you. And thank you for your continued good work on behalf of the congregation, your ministries that we've seen on the website, and really appreciate what you and Mike are doing. Mike, would you speak to us?
Gladly. My first word to the congregation is thank you. It's been really encouraging to me to get notes of encouragement and people that are praying for me after my hip replacement. Thanks. Really appreciate the care. Today is 2 weeks, and I think I'm doing pretty well. As any of you that have walked through this know, you feel pretty good for a while, then all of a sudden you start having different pains and feelings, and you start to wonder what they mean. So tomorrow I see the doctor for my first follow-up, and I've got lots of good questions, but I think I'm doing really well, other than my leg still hurts. So I think it's good. I would echo Michael's thoughts in that the pandemic, the adjustments there, and now the last 2 weeks, the heightened attention we're paying to racism as Christians has been at times exhilarating and at times very stressful, and they'll continue to affect us going forward. And yeah, I mean, someday when we write the book on our pastoral lives, this will be a significant chapter, but we continue to adjust and try to do our best. I would ask just for continued grace from everybody. We will continue to adjust and not get things perfect. But please know the staff is trying hard and trying to meet a variety of needs within our congregation. To that end, we'll never make anybody exclusively happy, but we'll try to hit the middle for a lot of people. And so let's have a lot of patience and grace with each other. The biggest thing for me has been, if you recall, I had been approved to be on sabbatical at this time, and the board has graciously bumped that to this time next year. And so I've been planning ahead for that. It gave me time to reapply for a Lilly Foundation grant to do some educational travel. That's a competitive grant from a company based in Indianapolis. And if that turns out, it'll allow me to do some nice travel. So that has been one thing that I've worked on in the last month to get that in. I've also been extended the honor of representing our church as a pastor speaking at a week-long family camp at Camp Hebron in mid-July, and where I'll teach adults in the morning and then whole families at night, along with Val. And I look forward to that opportunity to dip my toe back in the camping world, which is what I came from prior to being a pastor. The visiting speakers or speakers from within us have been spread out over the months to come, anticipating a time when we'll be meeting back together face-to-face. So between now and the end of August, you'll hear from Jenny Fujita, from Jeff Hollenbach, from Josh Meyer, pastor over at Franconia Mennonite, from Karen Nancarvis, pastor out in Lancaster area, who's spoken to us before, and in late August, Leonard Dow. So those are some of the visiting folks you'll hear from. We'll also continue to invite folks among us to help us in the coming weeks or months with the racism issue, just sharing experiences and learning, because I think this is just a key time for us to stand against systemic racism in the way of Jesus. And to do that, we need to keep learning how it affects us in our area. So be open to learning there. The final thing I'll leave with you is just one of my favorite verses. It's a principle from Philippians 4:6 that I try to remember on a daily basis. And it just bears repeating in this time. I'll paraphrase it. Don't be anxious about anything, but with everything, take your requests to God with thanksgiving and pray about them. So my word to you is to try to navigate these uncertain waters without anxiety and take your thoughts to God in prayer. Thanks.
Mike, thank you much for sharing, and thank you for your continued ministry among us and leading that you and Michael do, especially on the website and other ways of ministry while we're in this unusual time. I now want to turn attention to 3 task forces that all kind of took shape in the last several months. One of them was earlier, which John Frankenfield will report on. That began back in January already, dealing with job descriptions and looking at both lay and pastoral staff job descriptions here, just to sharpen the pencil on those and update them. Something that we felt was necessary as a leadership board. So there's a task force that John will report on. One task force of heightened interest would be what we're calling the regathering task force, which was formed several weeks ago to start wrestling with the issue of what can we start to look forward to as a church body with regards to coming together again. And then a third task force kind of began organically, which Ken Rush will speak on, and that's to explore options for the barn that's located back behind the farmhouse at the rear of our property. You might recall that CLB for a number of years, literally, has asked at different meetings whether anybody had the energy or excitement or enthusiasm to think about that barn. Well, as it turned out, Ken will report on a number of persons who have come together to think on that together. So I want to turn this over to Ken at this time, followed by the other two task forces that I'll introduce as Ken completes. So Ken, you want to share with us?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I would point to a document that the Congregational Leadership Board put out, I believe around October of 2019, which was called Issues to Attend to Fall 2019 to 2020. It looks something like this. And on there was number 5, facilities. And then under that was the future of the barn. And I would say it kind of piqued my curiosity a little because I love barns. I think that they're treasures, no matter, if they're an old barn, I think that there's a lot of intrinsic value to them, etc. Then within a few months, not that long, I got another thing in the church mail that went from the yellow, and I started to notice that it said done and in process. So I was like, wow, there's a little bit of a movement here. They're actually getting a lot done. So I think at that time I expressed an interest to Jeff that I wanted to see if it was possible to explore the possibility of saving the barn. And I know that some of the things that were brought up were that there was an issue around safety and that the foundation was beginning to erode. So Jeff said, go for it, look into it, see if you can get anybody interested in it and see what it might cost to, save the barn. And that was the initial step that kind of started. Initially, there was a lot of, challenges relating to just some basic exploration, but the first step was just exploration. After the initial stage of exploration, there was a little bit of, the reality is COVID-19 hit, and a group of us started to walk around a path that Todd and some others had created. So in the process of just walking the property, a lot of conversations began to happen. And from that, I think a group of people emerged who had a general interest in at least exploring to seeing what it would be like to save the barn and begin to vision what it would look like if the barn was saved, how could we actually use it then? The foundation is a significant issue. There's a time element related to the foundation because it is really eroding rather quickly. The task force that came together was Todd Aldifer from CLB, Bruce Moyer from CLB, Brian Gorley from the trustees, Steve Huntsberger, Jenny Fujita, and Brent Aldifer. And I'm really excited about that group. We had some very positive, just nice initial conversations with the CLB trustees and stewardship. After meeting with the trustees, we're looking into what it will take to save the barn and also fix the barn. And during that time of us gathering information on what it will take to save the barn and fix the barn, I would just invite the congregation to do two things, walk the property, because the property that Blooming Glen has is beautiful. It's a lot of open space. It's a lot of farmland, and it lends itself to just, peace and reflection. But I would also invite you to dream what the possibilities are for the barn and reach out to any of us on the task force. And I would just like to point out that for me, it's been a real blessing. So far, it's been a very fun, life-giving process of conversations to date. And I look more forward to a lot of the same going forward. So that's about it.
Ken, thank you for giving us an update on that. Appreciate the energy you're putting into it, and certainly invite anybody else who has a passion for that, to reach out to Ken and make your interest known. So I want to move on to the next introduction of a task force that's standing right now, and that's led by John Frankenfield, dealing with job descriptions and those items to explore. So John, are you with us? Could you report to us for a few minutes?
I'm here and I can try to report. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm delighted to say that I have an incredible committee that has working with me. Would be Robin Schilling, Robin Long, Jeff Hollenbach, and Megan Schrag. And this committee has kept me on my toes because they're on top of the issues. I send out minutes or notes and they correct me immediately. We have started meeting back in February and have met 8 different times to deal with the issues of how do you go from 4 pastors to 2 pastors, which we've experienced in the last couple of years. And so we're looking at all the responsibilities and the expectations that we have as a congregation and needs as a congregation to be fulfilled by the pastoral staff. It's been a pretty incredible task because we are dealing with we have 2 pastors that have been called to different roles than we're asking them to do today. And so we're working at that, and we've had very good conversations. We've worked through the documents a number of times. We're looking at specifically job descriptions and responsibilities, and we're dealing with it at an academic level. You know, we have not done the application level, which we have to report to CLB with what we think our findings will be in terms of what kind of pastoral roles we should have, what needs do we have, how are they being addressed, and are they being addressed within our staff today, or do we need to add staff or modify staff to make it work? I think we have some interesting opportunities looking forward. And we've not just looked at pastors, we've looked at every staff member within the congregation, within the employment group. And so we've got about a 4-page document at this point that I've not given it to Jeff yet because I know he's going to turn it around and say, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. So I'm going to wait till we're all done before Jeff hears from us, and the CLB can see what we think might be an appropriate way. It's been a good process. Again, we've had good conversations with the pastors, good conversation with Jeff, and the committee has been very, very supportive in making it work. And we hope to wrap it up to give a report to CLB probably by the end of the month.
John, thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing in terms of gathering those groups together, or that group of persons together, and talking with our staff to try to improve us and sharpen the areas that need to be sharpened and give us good guidance there. So appreciate that and look forward to hearing your findings on all that. There's one more task force, perhaps the most timely one. That would be the regathering task force. And I want to turn this over to Todd Oliver, who has led that group. And Todd, you're here to report to us. I believe I saw you earlier. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Jeff. I think Jeff stuck me with this task because back in March, I got stuck with the COVID task at Grandview as far as developing an inpatient acute care disaster plan, essentially, and then a part of the recovery plan as we start to come out of it from a hospital and a medical care standpoint. So that's became the COVID task force person, I guess, in Jeff's mind. Anyway, to be concise, I'm going to just sort of paraphrase a bit of a note I sent after our CLB meeting last night. Our committee, when Jeff asked us to do this, it's maybe a couple of weeks ago, we formulated a committee that came from CLB, from elders, and from the pastors, and we added a couple of other people to try and broaden our perspective and opinions. And I want to thank those people that were a part of that. We met several times. One meeting was 2 hours in the pavilion. Another was an hour watching Mike recover his hip in his backyard. And so they were long meetings, and that committee did a good job of listening to each other from a wide, disparate array of opinions and thoughts and emotions and feelings and experiences. And it was an enriching experience to spend that time hearing each other out. That committee was Mike Ford, Michael Bishop, Rick Kratz from Elders, myself, Rachel Swartley, and Deb Kernat were the ones that thought and processed. And I want to thank them for spending the time and energy to go through things and think about things. These are not easy times. Things are changing day by day. They're challenging things to talk about, difficult decisions, and just no perfect answers, because the information you had today is different tomorrow and will be different in a week. But our task was to try and to say, how are we going to begin to regather or restart or recover, or what will be the next phase of what we do. And so as a committee, we met those couple of times and formulated some thoughts and ideas. There were areas where we agreed and areas where we disagreed, areas where we found consensus and areas where we didn't find consensus. And I think what we did then last night was to try and present that wide variety of thoughts, ideas, and opinions and information that's out there to CLB and the staff last night. And in our CLB staff meeting last night, we spent maybe 2 hours on Zoom, and about an hour of that was devoted to talking about regathering, the how, the when, the why, the where, and all of those issues. And that was also a very productive, detailed dialogue just in regards to how can we do this. And just like for us at the hospital, when we were designing plans for acute care, the safety of staff at the hospital, the safety of the patients, and the safety of the family was important. And that also, continues to be the important thing as we figure out how to regather through all this. Since we first began meeting, then I guess June 5th, the Bucks County turned yellow. Supposedly Bucks County is turning green on June 19th. What happened in the state legislature yesterday, no one knows what that means. But at the end of our meeting last night, after we processed the thoughts that we had at the committee level, and we processed them through CLB, and many of the same or similar questions were brought up with staff. What I'll outline for you is what was suggested by CLB and the staff as our plan for the future, well, the near future, I should say. Number one is most of the churches in the area are jealous of Blooming Glen right now because we don't just have a building, we have whatever 100 acres that we have, and we happen to have a large pavilion nestled on 2 acres of grass behind our facility that's flat and easy to access and makes it easy to disperse, allows us to be outside, allows us to much more easily, safely space and safely distance and access it, not just through one narrow point in and one narrow point out. So just that fact that we have that, and not just bricks and mortar, we thought that we would take advantage of that facility or that opportunity to maximize the safety and the opportunity of being able to get together in order to cohort people in the safest way possible. So for the near future, meaning what's left of June, July, and August, our initial plan is to meet outdoors centered around the pavilion, but spread out in the flat grass area around the pavilion. Weather permitting, obviously, we're not going to be in umbrellas on lawn chairs out in an open cornfield. And if weather looks like it will not be favorable, we would switch to a Zoom meeting instead of church, much like we would if we had a snowstorm in January on a Sunday morning as well. Our thought for restarting would be that our first regathering, so to speak, behind the church would be on Sunday, June 28th, would be the first regathering. That would be 2.5 weeks from now. We would make it an outdoor service, short, concise, no Sunday school, but to try and, gather in that form. It would be centered at the pavilion, but spread out, socially distanced on the grass. We would have the picnic tables there in the pavilion, but there's not going to be tons of seating there because we would encourage only families or household units to be at a single picnic table, and they'll be spread out, and the rest of us would be spread out in lawn chairs or whatever you choose. As they say, I think personally distanced, or what's the phrase that's not socially distanced now? They say personally distanced or whatever it is. We would then organize ourselves like that. We would be encouraging people to follow the CDC guidelines that are recommended for hygiene and for personal interaction and for social distancing, because that is the guidelines that are out there and the ones that we have all become very accustomed to. There are currently no guidelines right now for using face masks for outdoor activity, but we would encourage people to wear their face masks, because for those people that feel more comfortable with face masks, we want those people to be embraced and not feel pressured not to do anything like that. It is incredibly difficult to mandate something like a face mask, but we would strongly encourage people to do that out of respect for others. We would also encourage those who are high risk, the elderly, those who have underlying medical conditions or immunosuppressed, or those who are uncomfortable meeting together, and certainly those people who are sick or ill or think they may have been or were just with someone who may have been, using the common sense that we've all learned to not show up either. For services, we will attempt to make the services taped. We will attempt to make them streamed, live stream if possible. If not, they'll be recorded and then posted on YouTube as they've been already, so that those people who can't get to church or who are unsure, uncertain, or are at higher risk feel comfortable staying at home and watching the service on either live stream or in a video format like they've been doing for the past 12 weeks. The feeling was that singing is important in our heritage. There's some controversy about that, at least for now, since we are outside and we can extra safely space to distance under the supervision of Michael Bishop, that we will have singing outside with the feeling that it is outside, and we can create some extra spacing there. Using the pavilion, the facilities will be open out there. The rest of the really detailed logistics would be handled by our administrative staff and our pastoral staff as we get there, as far as flow in and out. And that would be the general plan for July and August. A decision about moving inside will just basically be continually being reevaluated on an ongoing basis based upon state, county, and federal government guidelines and the process of the disease in the area. As a wholly separate issue, the rentals of the church and the pavilion will also resume. And I think Robin and the church staff that run that, they have a modified rental agreement and some modified clauses for deposits for things like that. And the renters of the facilities will also be asked to comply with both the CDC and the state and county guidelines that are in place at those times, since that's the easiest thing for us to do, is to ask for compliance of those guidelines. So I think that's the majority of things that cover a restart plan. So just to summarize that, to back up, it would be June 28th for our first gathering, centered at the pavilion, but spread out widely in the area around the pavilion, with everybody being clear that we don't want people there that are high risk in any way, shape, or form, or who are ill in any way, shape, or form. We'll require that. It's obviously going to require a lot of self-policing and respect for each other's, because all of us, how we feel about this is slightly different, because it's become a very emotional thing dealing with this for the past 4 months. We want to make sure and respect each other's thoughts and opinions and each other's feelings in regards to safety and or lack thereof. It obviously is something that is changeable, but as we are moving back towards a more normal gathering period and a more normal society now, we felt it was the right thing to begin getting our toes wet, getting back together, and this would be the most appropriate and safest option for everybody involved. And we're fortunate to have this as an option for the outdoors. So Jeff, if there's other questions you think I need to bring up, I'm happy to answer them. Or if anybody wants to call me, text me, email me, happy to field those questions. This is trying to drive the car down the middle of the road and stay out of gutters on both sides, as far as safety and regathering and spiritual life as a congregation together.
Okay. Todd, take time to note a comment that Brenda has introduced to everybody. So I'd be happy for you to come back into the dialogue to speak more to that, okay? So you'll see a chat that she's introduced to everyone. Go ahead and read it and then come back into the dialogue in a second. So Brenda, thank you for that. And while I say a few things on behalf of the leadership board, I also would welcome you to chat to me directly if there's a subject that you want discussed a little bit further. I'll try to juggle that as I speak with you. And also with regards to a particular item that you might have heard today, perhaps you say, hey, I have a specific question, just chat that to me, and I'll try to pull that person back into the dialogue during what we might call our discussion time. So Todd, there's two chats. One also Sarah has introduced to everybody, and I think that that's something you can look at and speak to also. Giving you a few minutes, Todd, I'm going to speak on behalf of CLB, and I also want to say a lot of thanks, and I've said it before, but in particular to the persons in our staff, both lay and pastoral, for the incredible flexibility and incredible efforts that they've made to continue to minister to our church fellowship. The variety of ways of doing it, we haven't been stuck in a rut in doing it again and again the same way. They've tried different things, a lot of different content on the website, which I think is a good thing too. And in that regard, just want to hold them up for thanks and affirmation. On behalf of CLB also, and more so personally, I want to apologize for bad communication to the congregation in that I neglected to hand over to our administrative staff the minutes from our last several meetings of the Congregational Leadership Board. We did meet in March and in April and in May and again last evening remotely by Zoom, and minutes were prepared for those, and it was an oversight on my part in not forwarding those minutes to pastoral staff so that they could then be forwarded on to the congregation. So I think they actually might have gone out in an email where you'd say, hey, here's the minutes of the last 3 months of leadership board. Well, that's the way you got them, and that was my fault for not timely putting them out to you. I also want to acknowledge that during the lead up to this meeting, we had invited questions to be emailed to me. There was one subject that I received 3 comments on that I want to give some assurance to the congregation that we're going to be in further discussion on. And that pertained to the ending of the congregational sponsorship of the Mennonite subscriptions, the Purpose magazine and Rejoice booklets ended. They were not part of our continued spending plan. I've heard comments on that, and certainly we will look at that a little bit further and have further dialogue on that. These are periodicals that we as a church do embrace and certainly want to encourage. The question comes down to whether they will become something the church would buy for everybody or in some other way facilitate. And so there'll be further dialogue between the leadership board and interested parties on that subject. So I promise you that. Now, let's dive into something a little bit unrehearsed, unorthodox, and I pray you'll give me a little bit flexibility if I cut anybody off or neglect to get questions answered. I believe, Rachel, did you put out to me here that you would like to make a general comment? Is that a comment that you would like to make to the congregation, or one that you'd like to follow up with me at a later time?
Could I speak now for just a moment?
Yes.
Thank you to each of you who presented tonight. I value your work and the effort, the hours you've spent that your presentations tonight reflect. In viewing the agenda for tonight's meeting, when it was sent out last week, I noticed that the agenda featured the voices of 9 men. And I encourage our congregation, as we continue to strive to do better in all that we do, that we continue to make it clear that the voices of women matter. In our leadership, in our presentations, women's voices matter too, and I think we need to keep working towards that.
I agree, Rachel, and appreciate the input of everybody. And certainly to the extent that this was thrown together without sensitivity towards that, I apologize. I just kind of threw it together. So
It reflects the people who are in those positions of leadership of task forces, leadership of all the foundation groups, pastors. It's representative of those groups. So I understand how the agenda came together this time, but it's a more systemic issue than this particular agenda. Thanks.
right, good. Thank you for prompting us on that. Todd, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I know you can think fast, so you probably got several chats that raise good questions and some further thoughts, and maybe I know that you haven't had the ability to process those chats you might have seen through your task force, but I'm going to put you on the spot to just give us some response of some kind.
Okay, so I don't want to, without getting, I'll answer the three questions that are there. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds as it comes to scientific data or medical data or epidemiologic data, but to take them one at a time. I think Jen Huntsberger had a question in regards to the number of people that would be at a pavilion service. Currently, in the green phase, there are congregate gatherings of 25, more than 25 that are discouraged, is what it is. That's a fairly arbitrary number, but that's what is in the green guidelines, as 10 was in the yellow, in the other phase prior to being yellow. Once you go green, that number becomes 250. Now those numbers were put together, whether it was indoor, outdoor, whether it was a 10 by 10 room, or whether it was a 50-acre property. So there's not a whole lot of science behind those numbers, and there's a fair number of people in our church that attended large rallies in the past couple of days. So I think the simple answer, Jen, is that if we're green by then, the number is 250 in the quote green phase. And that's part of the reason that we chose to go outdoors, because we can spread out. And there is very little community spread right now, and there is very little outdoor spread right now of the virus. And so in an outdoor open air setting, safely spaced, there should be very little spread. So I think the answer was that, presuming we are green by the 28th, that number would be 250 on the current issue. The other question was from Sarah Bergen, who asked the question about that Swamp and Franconia have already started this past Sunday doing drive-through churches, where they have people in their cars in the parking lot for church. There's been people that have been doing that all around the state, around the country for the past couple of months, and they already started with that this past week. We're going to be 3 weeks after that doing something a little bit different. We actually contemplated something like that as long ago as Easter Sunday, doing church in cars in the parking lot. And then the last question, the third question, was from Brenda Shelley, who expressed the concern, which I think we all have, related to our elderly and those who are more at risk of acquiring the virus, number one, and two, of secondary complications if they get it. And also concerned by the fact of who I am, that if I'm a doctor and I'm talking about reopening, that gives tacit approval or a rubber stamp of safety and gives people a false sense of security. And I get that. I can't remove that from what I do, other than, to say that everything is about risk and benefit. And I think that, we need to encourage people to be introspective of their own risks, whether you're elderly or whether you're immunosuppressed or whether you're on immunosuppressive medications or whatever your exposure has been, and encourage you to not come. And I think we also need to, if they do come, we need to encourage people who are there to be respectful in your interactions. She has the question, if masks are not mandated. Masks aren't mandated currently outdoors by anybody. So coming to church, us even saying we strongly recommend masks for the safety and protection of others is already going one step farther than the community is going, or than the current CDC recommendations are for. Currently, masks are still recommended for indoor businesses and gatherings, but I think we need to be just openly and understanding and respectful of the people that do come, especially our elderly group. And nobody wants to put anybody at safety and at risk. So I don't know if there's a lot more to be said by that, because we're never going to find a perfect time. This virus is going to be amongst us in this community for probably at least the next 6 to 12 months in some way, shape, or form. It's not going to magically go away. It's going to sort of smolder and fizzle, and there's going to be stops and starts and some bumps and some rises here and there. And the reality is, if we meet together as a church, over the next 3 months, it's likely we have 1, 2, or there's going to be somebody that turns positive. We already have had people in our church who've had the illness already as well too, just statistically. But I think we can do the best we can at understanding and respecting each other's wishes and desires. We need to understand ourselves and stay away if we are at high risk, and understand that we need to continue to be socially distanced and spaced each other when we're there congregating. But we tried to find the lowest risk way that we possibly could get together. And I think this happens to be a reasonable balance, and it's in line with the direction the state and county are both going as well. So I don't know if I answered that fully for you or if I just sidestepped it. Was there something else, Jeff?
No, but thank you for the input, Todd. I really do appreciate that, and the work of your committee to listen and also to come up with some ideas for us. Does anybody have any more questions for Todd about this process? There will be a lot more detail that will be introduced about what would be expected. For example, there won't be offering plates being circulated. There's going to be no greeters shaking hands. There'll be things that we do that will be very different and will be made known well in advance. All right. Well, I have no other chat and I've been checking texts along the way, and I have no other input that's been fed to me in those manners. However, I do invite it. Your leadership groups of all kinds, the task forces you heard from, and the groups of elders and trustees and gifts discernment and stewardship and the leadership board really do welcome your continued input to our groups. We believe that we want to serve the church by listening, and certainly want you to feel free to reach out in a different setting. Becca's asking about online bulletins. We will have to, Becca, in some way do that in order to facilitate an orderly service, or if they are printed, they probably would be handed out or made available in a way that we deem safe. So thank you for raising that point of logistics also. I've asked Mike Ford to wrap us up tonight. We still have some daylight out there that everybody can enjoy. And Mike, you've heard a lot of what's going on in the church spoken here tonight. You've heard concerns. You sense the questions and the things that we all wrestle with. And I would ask you to ask for God's guidance and blessing on us. And I will leave that time of prayer to you. And we will close after Mike is completed with his prayer. We'll probably, let's say this, give maybe a minute or 30 seconds of just open time. People can talk to each other or just leave the meeting. That's fine. So Mike, would you close out our formal time, please?
Sure. Let me go on. Let's pray together, please. Lord God, thank you again that we can meet in this way. Not as ideal as face-to-face, but we are grateful that we can still be together virtually and can do church business. And so we just thank you for the fellowship that we have, such as it is. God, I want to lift up specifically our foundation groups as they continue to work on things in our ministry to our community and to the world. Pray for guidance for each of them. I pray especially for the task forces right now, the barn and the job description, and Thank you for the regathering task force. God, for any ongoing decisions that need to be made related to those things or that come out of CLB or elders. God, I want to pray a couple things, and I would ask that you give us wisdom and abundance, that you give us humility, that we constantly are coming to you in those groups in prayer, asking for those things, and that we are not too confident in our own abilities, and yet that we can walk forward with accountability with you and each other. So God, again, continue to grant us discernment for any decisions that we're making. I specifically want to lift up the issue of racism and our place in the world as Christians, as followers of Jesus, that we can be a great light at this point to stand against systematic racism and places where people are not being treated equally or well. We are, by your example, Jesus, we know you constantly reached out to those on the margins and those that were downtrodden and those that had less power or money or position than anybody else. And so, God, this is a chance too where we can reach out to our brothers and sisters of different colors, of different races, and make sure that they know that we love them with the love of Jesus, that we stand with them, behind them, and that we're doing our part too to help eradicate inequalities. So guide us as a congregation and give us individual opportunity to be like Jesus to those around us. God, thank you for good, honest discussion tonight. And to that end, we will walk forward, still being at different places, and yet wanting to have a togetherness as a congregation. And so I pray for continued communication and good listening. I pray for patience and flexibility where we disagree, where we're not seeing things the same. I pray for sensitivity to the other, that wherever we are, as we start to gather, Lord, we will be very mindful with a servant's heart of the other people and what needs are. I pray for wisdom for those who should not attend the church at this point as we start to gather and give them a sense of peace about that. I pray for us to increase our abilities with technology, that we can make more things available in a live stream or through recordings. And we pray for your help there. God, for individuals that have needs, that are seeking healing or consolation, we lift them up to you, especially those families that are grieving the loss of loved ones at this point. Just continue to heal their broken hearts a day at a time as they move into a new normal themselves. God, for anything that's been unmentioned specifically, I just allow a few seconds here of silence for any person just to lift before you any thought, concern, or praise they have on behalf of our church. So Lord, we end with a plea that you will guide us, provide for us, and continue to help us with decisions we make in the weeks and months ahead. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mike. Good night, everybody.